Today, we're diving into a really chilling story of absolute power. It's about the 24-year reign of the Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceaușescu. And really, it's a gripping account of how a leader can command an entire nation with an iron fist, only to see all of that power just crumble in the most violent way you can imagine.
And this timeline, well, it lays out the whole tragic arc of his rule, plain and simple. In 1965, he takes total control. Fast forward to 1989, and his reign ends in front of a firing squad. So that's the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did it come to this? How does a man go from the very pinnacle of power to such a brutal, brutal end?
So, the final act all goes down in the chaos of December 1989. It was incredibly swift, it was bloody, and it absolutely shocked the world. But to really get a handle on this violent collapse, we've got to go back, way back, to the very beginning.
Yeah, Nicolae Ceaușescu wasn't born into power or anything like that. He actually came from a pretty modest peasant background. Kind of an unlikely start for a man who would one day build this massive cult of personality around himself and rule millions of people with an iron fist.
And this right here maps out his calculated climb to the top. As a young man in the 1930s, he joins the Communist Party and just proves to be a master survivor. He endured prison, he navigated these treacherous political purges, and he used this combination of loyalty and just raw ambition to climb the ladder. And by 1965, he'd made it. He was at the top, General Secretary, and that set the stage for everything that came next.
So once he got power, how did he hold on to it so tightly? Well, it wasn't just about political maneuvering. Ceaușescu meticulously, and I mean meticulously, built this all-encompassing cult of personality. He basically positioned himself as the indispensable father and savior of the entire nation.
His strategy was almost like a playbook for autocrats, and it's so brutally effective because it preys on basic human psychology. So first, you consolidate control of the party, make sure everyone is loyal. Then, you start using nationalist rhetoric, creating this us versus them mentality. And then, crucially, you unleash the secret police to make fear just a part of everyday life. And you wrap all of that up in propaganda that portrays you, and only you, as the nation's great protector.
And that third step? It all relied on this organization, the Securitate. They were the terrifying instruments of his control. We're talking about a secret police force that was known for its huge network of informants, its complete and utter disregard for human rights, and its use of just pure terror to keep the population in line.
And of course, none of this works if you don't have total control of information, right? The state-controlled media didn't just report the news, it literally created an alternate reality. A reality where Ceaușescu was a genius, a hero, the conductor, the leader, who was guiding Romania into this perfect golden age.
But that whole golden age propaganda, it had one very specific job, to hide a dark and growing reality. You see, Ceaușescu prided himself on Romania being independent from the Soviet Union, but the economic policies he used to do that, well, they would come at a devastating cost to his own people.
Just look at this. The gap between these two columns is staggering. The state propaganda was relentless, promising prosperity and abundance. But for ordinary citizens, especially by the 1980s, the reality was just grim. We're talking empty store shelves, freezing apartments in the middle of winter, and constant rolling blackouts. That golden era was a complete and total fiction.
And the crucial thing to understand here is that this wasn't an accident. It was policy. To pay off the massive foreign debt Romania had racked up, Ceaușescu exported basically everything he could get his hands on, including food and fuel. He forced this extreme austerity on the population, and you could bet that public frustration was just quietly boiling over beneath the surface.
And that brings us to the final chapter. We're back in December 1989. After years and years of fear, of deprivation, of repression, the Romanian people had finally reached their breaking point.
And the collapse was just astonishingly fast. It all started with some protests in the city of Timișoara on December 16th. Within days, the unrest had spread to the capital. On December 21st, Ceaușescu gives this big speech expecting to be cheered, but instead he was jeered.
The very next day, he and his wife, Elena, fled. And then, on Christmas Day, their rule came to its final violent end.
There was no long, drawn-out process here. They were captured, put through a hastily arranged show trial, and then immediately executed. And just like that, the 24-year reign of Nicolae Ceaușescu was over.
So what's left behind after a rule that was so brutal and so domineering? Well, the legacy is incredibly complex, and for Romania, it left some deep and lasting scars.
His time in power is overwhelmingly remembered for the repression, the economic disaster, and that suffocating cult of personality. And yeah, sure, his regime did oversee some significant industrialization, but all that development was literally built on the backs of the people. It was fueled by the exact same austerity that starved them. It's a really complicated picture of modernization that was achieved through just immense suffering. It's also really important to remember that the fall of Ceaușescu wasn't some isolated event. It was the most violent chapter in a truly pivotal year, 1989, a year that saw communist regimes topple one after another all across Eastern Europe. It reshaped the entire continent forever.
Which leaves us with this final kind of chilling thought. The story of Ceaușescu proves that a regime built on fear, on surveillance, and on propaganda can survive for a very, very long time. It can seem completely invincible. But what it also shows is that there is always a breaking point. And the question that leaves us with is, what does it take to finally reach it?